Hey everyone, this is Randy from BibleBuyingGuide.com. I am here today with a filmmaker. I'm here with Tim Mahoney, who has created several films called Patterns of Evidence. And he has a new film coming out soon, which I was able to preview, and I highly recommend it, and I like it a lot. So we're going to start with Tim talking about himself and talking about Patterns of Evidence. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being on your show, Randy. And I grew up in a Bible-believing home, and I never thought that I would be going into the Middle East and doing these types of things. In fact, whenever they talked about Israel and the Middle East, I was convinced that it was the last place I wanted to go. It sounded too dangerous. Of course, that was I grew up during when Israel was having different wars, and it seemed pretty volatile, and there's a lot of talk about the second coming and prophecy, and I just thought, boy, it was pretty scary. But here I am now, after almost over 20 years. I have been going into Egypt and Israel and Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and searching for the story of the Exodus. And in the very beginning, I started in Egypt, and that began. I worked with a scientist from Sweden. His name was Dr. Leonard Moeller. And he gave me really more of the idea to have a scientific approach to all of this. And that's basically what I've been working towards was, well, what is this scientific approach? And that would be a pattern of evidence. Science uses patterns. And so that's basically how we looked at the Bible. And we've got a new film coming out called Journey to Mount Sinai. It's a new Patterns of Evidence film, and I created a Mount Sinai scorecard for people to basically be able to look at. And we actually have on our website a way to download this scorecard. So when you go to the movie and you're there, you'll have already there's other documents that basically allow you to see, well, what are the things I should be looking for? So we basically give you a pattern to look for. You can get your Bible, you can read the references, and then you're able to then watch the film. And the first film is going to look at 3 different potential Mount Sinai locations. And that's basically something new. I don't think a lot of people have ever watched the movie and had an interactive guide to basically go on the investigation.
That's a good point. I've never seen that before, except for Patterns of Evidence. Now, I viewed, The Journey Home, which was very touching, and that I'm sure that was a hard one to make for you. And then also Patterns of Evidence, Journey to Mount Sinai, Part 1. It's a 2-part film. And then one thing I've noticed, one issue that I've had with maps in the backs of Bibles is when you see the Exodus route, you always see like anywhere from 3 to 6 possible routes. And then you see different locations for possible locations for Mount Sinai. And I always wanted just show me where it is, but it's not that simple, is it?
No, that's a good point, Randy. It's not that simple. What ends up happening is that there are reasons why people have suggested certain locations. And usually that's because there's a particular piece of evidence that they think is compelling enough to say, I think this is the connection to the Bible and this location. And the difference here is that what I've done with this film is I've looked at the overall pattern. What is that overall pattern? And what are the main points? If you look at all the films that we have created, there's always 5 or 6 steps, And so in this particular one, we've got the journey to the mountain. What was the journey that they took? Is there any evidence of campsites or wildernesses? And what is the time that it took, to get there? And if you have a mountain very close to Egypt, it would take a shorter time than if you had a mountain that was further away.
Yeah. Now, I like your approach to this. Instead of saying this is where it was, you were actually interviewing different experts and analyzing their information. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. That's been our approach, is to hear from multiple viewpoints. And some people are just scholars. They're not believers. Some of them are just telling us what they know from their archaeology and from what they have come to believe. And others is other people who are in the film are Exodus explorers. And so we've got a mixture of the different types, Exodus explorer types. We've got the scholars, And then we've got people who feel as if they are believers, but they're scientists, and they think that they have a reason for this location. In the very first film, one of the things that we're going to begin to look at is inscriptions. We know in the movie, The Moses Controversy, that we started to learn about that there were inscriptions that were with this early form of Hebrew writing. And so what we're going to hear from is some scholars are going to say that what they believe is this early form of Hebrew writing is talking about events in the Exodus, such as manna.
That was very interesting. I saw that there were several different versions or different ideas of what it could be, and also different theories. And you called it the Hebrew approach and the
Yes.
Egyptian approach.
Yes.
I take the Hebrew approach, just for the record. I didn't keep score as I went because I didn't download the scorecard, but I kept the score in my head, and I'm definitely the Hebrew approach. I'm going to be interested in seeing part 2, where you actually give your conclusion. So when can we expect to see that?
Well, we're praying that we need to raise the money to basically make the next film. We have a lot of it filmed, but once again, I guess you'd say we're a ministry, and we've raised enough money to make this first film, and it's going to be in theaters, and it's really important. You know, a lot of people talking about voting. Well, if people can get out to see our film, that's a vote for the Bible, because our films are somewhat, what we've heard from others is that we are probably one of the leading biblical apologist type films that have come out. There aren't really a lot of people that are making films that show that there's a historical credibility to the Bible. And so this showing that we have is very important for people to attend. If you can bring your small group or Bible study or Sunday school class, bring your family, it's going to be well worth it. It's October 17th and 18th. And if they go to patternsofevidence.com, they can see where a trailer, they can learn a little bit more about it. They can download the documents for the scorecard, and they can then find out where a theater is near them. And they can, if it says, buy tickets, that doesn't buy a ticket until you actually know what theater it is, but that'll get you close.
Sounds good. And I do recommend it. I did get a preview, and I do recommend it. I was impressed. I learned a lot of things. I love biblical archaeology. I love cartography, and I like timelines. And that wall that you created, that's impressive. Can you talk about that wall just a little bit with the time?
Right. The Wall of Time came out in the very first film. We were trying to understand a way to have inspired a way to understand, well, when did the events of the Bible happen? And as you know, when you start to look at that, there are different dating methodologies. One of them is the biblical timeline. Another one is Egyptian time. And Egyptian time is based on years, but it's also based on what we call dynasties and kingdoms. And so there's different kingdoms. There's like a middle kingdom, and then there's the new kingdom. The new kingdom is on the Wall of Time, is in that time when Ramesses, the Pharaoh Ramesses, lived. And that's in that 1250 BC time period. Well, the biblical timeline, it says that the events of the Exodus happened around 1450, roughly, in that time period. But what's happened is that people have tried to connect Ramesses, the kingdom of Ramesses, with the Bible timeline. So they've basically slid the Bible back in time. And when they do that, a lot of the other biblical connections aren't there. In fact, neither is the Exodus. There is really not an evidence for the Exodus at the time of Ramesses at all. But if you dig at the same location deeper in the ground, this is what Egyptologist David Roll started to see. And he's not a believer, he's an agnostic. He has questions, he doesn't know, but he could see the connection between the Bible. He was the one that started pointing towards Joseph, the life of Joseph and the early Israelites, his family, coming into that location and showing a pattern of evidence.
That is very interesting. Now, you mentioned in the film that you've been working on the Exodus story for 20 years. Can you talk about that journey a little bit?
Right. the first one that we started was in 2002 when we went to Egypt. And, when I came back from that trip in Egypt, I went to the very location where the Israelites were said to have lived. And one of the challenges that I heard was that there wasn't any evidence for them. And I came home, and Randy, I ended up having a crisis of faith. I felt this thought came into my mind that, everything that I had believed about the Bible, that my mom believed, that my family believed, was a lie. And at that very same moment, I heard another thought in my head that said, "Stop editing, get up, go to your office." So I went from this one thought that actually caused me to have the most horrid despair that I think I've ever had, to this command that said, "Stop editing, get up and go to your office." And that's when I went to my office, and it was very clear. When I got to my office, there's a shelves of books. I have a book collection of different books on the Bible and Egypt and maps like you're interested in. And I was very clear to read that book. And someone had given me this book a year earlier, and I just looked at it and put it on the shelf. I didn't know or didn't realize that I had been given a lot of information that pointed to Joseph. And I contacted that man who wrote the book, David Roll, and went to England. And that's when I first filmed him in, I think it was 2003. So over that period of time, then it took from the first trip to Egypt, and then I went another time, and I had other people going and filming, and then trips to Israel and other places, 12 years before I made or was able to finish the first film. And that was called Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus.
Okay. And then you're actually interviewing different experts, and then you're getting their theories, and you're compiling all the evidence and the theories, but then you actually go on location, and you're trying to walk in their shoes and see for yourself what could have happened. What is this possible? Are there any of those that really stood out to you as something that you felt like this was it, or some that you felt like this is not possible that this could be it?
I think, yeah, I mean, there are places that, when I was in Egypt the very first time, and I was at a place called Nuiba Beach, that has been speculated as a potential crossing spot. And I think that was the very first few weeks that I'd ever gotten involved with this. And I stood on that plane. That there's a plane that comes out with Sandy. And when I stood there, I thought, if this miracle happened here, it would have been absolutely spectacular. I mean, it would have been as big as or bigger than Cecil B. DeMille. It was a huge deal. And so that was my first impression, was that it was a big deal. And that would have been a really powerful place. I think another place that I went to is a place called Shechem. And this goes back to where they buried Joseph. And there is Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And just recently, there was a huge stir because they were sifting in their area. There was an archaeologist called Adam Zertal. And I went to meet him one time, but he thought that he might have found the altar of Joshua. And he wasn't necessarily sympathetic to the Bible in the sense that he wasn't like a practicing Jewish person or anything. But I think as he started looking at this evidence, he started to become more and more interested. And just recently, Dr. Scott Stripling, who's with Associates for Biblical Research, started sifting through this because they have a new technique. And they found the small amulet, and it's what they call the curse amulet. And what they found is an early form of Hebrew with a curse on it. And I believe they think that it's connected to what curses that were given at Mount Ebal, because there were blessings and curses. So these two mountains are kind of like this, and there's a valley in between. And at the end of the valley is a place where was a temple. And this is where Jacob lived for a while with his sons. There's a tragedy there with what happened with the men in Shechem. They were, I think, murdered. by two of Jacob's sons, and then later on, Joshua comes back to this very location, and he brings the bones of Joseph with him, and he buries them there. And there's a tomb at that location for the bones of Joseph. And there's also an area where it looks like there's a lot of spiritual activity, and there are altars there. And back in the last century, it's possible that they uncovered what appears to be these big standing stones. And Joshua was told to make some stones there. And the question is were those the stones that Joshua, wrote on? And is that part of the testimony of what happened at that location? So I think those two locations for me, Nueva and Shechem, have been very powerful for me.
That does sound really good. I like the sound of those. One thing that really stood out to me was you talking about Hebrew, and in the film you mentioned some writings on a wall that were interpreted by like 6 different people, or 10, maybe more than that. I don't remember exactly, but there's quite a few different people interpreted them, and every one of them had a different interpretation. I was just impressed or really amazed at how many different approaches there were to what does look like ancient Hebrew.
Yeah, and this is the challenge you see in the film, that we basically say, there are lots of attempts at trying to decipher these, and do these people have the correct methodology? That's the question.
That's really where you have to start, isn't it?
Yeah. So, Journey to Mount Sinai is such an important film, I think, because it's somewhat paving the way to find out, well, where is the true location? And what we're going to do is, once again, we've got this Mount Sinai score sheet, which you can download at our website, patternsofevidence.com. And we talk about voting. And once again, I say, when you go to a film, you can look this up and see it and bring people. You're voting for the Bible. You're letting the mainstream culture, because people watch this, they look to see, well, what's happening here? What are people interested in? And like I said, Patterns of Evidence, Journey to Mount Sinai is one of those films that basically tells the world that there is a God, and that people are interested in the Bible. And I know that's what you're interested in, Randy, and your viewers are interested in the Bible. Well, that's the reason why you should vote for this film and go out to the theater and support it, because we're a ministry. We need that type of support to keep making the next films, and we needed to make the next film, which is Journey to Mount Sinai Part 2.
Tell us one more time where we can see it and where we can learn more information.
Okay, well, it's going to be, if you go to patternsofevidence.com, altogether, patternsofevidence.com, you will see a trailer. You'll be able to download this. It's like a 6-page brochure. It has the maps and Bible criteria, and then you'll also be able to go, and it says buy tickets. So you go to buy tickets, you put your zip code in there, and it tells you the theaters in your area according to your zip code, and you need to pre-buy your ticket. That's the safest way, because we've had people many times that come to our films that think they can just buy them at the window. It's important to pre-buy it beforehand, because otherwise it's only showing for 2 nights. It's that Monday and Tuesday, the 17th and 18th of October. And once it's done, it won't be in theaters anymore.
When will they be able to purchase either streaming or Blu-ray, DVD, something like that?
That follows in the weeks after.
Okay.
So, yeah. But what we like to see is if you can support us in both places. Okay. If people can support us by going there and voting, letting the world know that Bible films are important, that's one way that helps us. And then afterwards, yeah, I think it would be good to buy it, because, a lot of this biblical information, you need to have it for yourself and for your family to share it, because you're going to meet more people, and you're going to basically want to say, hey, there's evidence for the Bible, and this opens up conversations with family members. I think it's important to have your own library of these types of films, because there's thousands of testimonies of people that lives have been impacted and changed because they saw a Patterns of Evidence film.
Very true. I'll place links in the notes for all the references that you've mentioned. so that we can go to your website, so that we can purchase tickets. And I very much appreciate you making these videos, these films, because they are important. And I really do recommend going to see this. I did get a preview and I enjoyed it. I liked it a lot and I highly recommend it. And I appreciate your time, Tim Mahoney. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Randy. God
Bye.
bless.